Hi, Chris Skell again here, back with Pinnacle Training Consulting Systems. So now we're talking about mobility, stability, control mobility, and skill. So those are important concepts that I want to review with you. And in the manual, see, mobility means having something that moves and has enough space. So when we look at the spine, that the spine can actually rotate and glide. We can talk about muscles. If muscles aren't flexible enough, they can't help with movement. So most of my clients and patients, and probably clients with you out there, are stiff. It's called hypomobile. If they're stiff, they can't side bend, they can't look down, they can't reach, they can't extend their leg, they can't flex their hip, they can't bend down. So we need to look at and create mobility first. When we look at then stability, when I'm talking about stability, that means co-contraction, which means traction on the abdominals or agonist, and then antagonist, which is the opposing side, or simply put, flexors and extensors. So when someone has a back injury, I as a therapist want my clients and my patients to get the ability to contract here on the front, but also to stabilize on the back, so everything is balanced. Controlled mobility is the ability to do something in a moving position. So an example of that would be a lunge. So someone has a true disc injury, having a disc, it's really hard to be able to stabilize and move up and down in a stable environment. So that would be called control mobility, or in place lunge. Okay? Skill is ability to perform a movement that is challenging, that is dynamic, that is very hard and taxing on the brain, usually typically the cerebellum and basal ganglia, which deals with balance. So an example would be something if you have doing a single leg touch or a single leg squat, that would be a skill activity, okay? So most of our clients out there, most of my patients, my concern is, do they have mobility? And can they get to stability and control? Skill for those clients who want to become sport specific, your athletes, your high level professionals, right? So remember those that we want mobility first. Now when we talk about the spine, if someone's got too much mobility, let's say they have in the manual, you'll see in Unit 5, spondylolisthesis, which means a forward translation, they have too much mobility. They have hypermobility. Their spine is unstable. So they need to contract. They need to actually learn how to stabilize the muscles of the multifidus, of the glutes, and the core, then working on creating more stretching or flexion-based activities, right? Okay? We talk about biomechanics, and just to go back to the cervical region for a minute, when we talk about now biomechanics, we're talking about how the spine moves from top down. So when we look at just the cervical region, which is from the skull to C7, when we flex our neck, you can see there's an opening or separation of the vertebra that means between each one of these. When you extend the spine, you can see there's a closure or approximation of the vertebra. That means coming together. That's a narrowing within the canal, which is right here. If we look at side bending of the neck, this side is getting compressed, this side is opening, and conversely the opposite direction happens. If we look at rotation, the same thing occurs. You're getting opening up here and closure over on this side. So remember we talked about the sets. The sets play a role in rotation in the neck, 45 degrees, 60 degrees in the thoracic, lumbar again, 90 degrees. So let's look at the lumbar. So we look at flexion of the spine. You can see clearly during flexion there's a gapping. When I say gapping, there's an opening between each vertebra, one on the other. That's an opening. That's going to help with a client who has spinal stenosis, someone who has a narrowing, someone who has a restriction in the spinal canal. With a disc injury, you do flexion, the disc is going to come out or push back. So extension, which is this motion you can see, is a compression of each vertebra and the spinous process one on the other, or a closure. So if someone has spinal stenosis and you have them doing arching their back, that is going to create more narrowing of the spinal canal. So that is contraindicated. So someone with spondylolisthesis, which I just said, remember, was a forward translation. There's instability, They want to do flexion because that'll unload the spine versus extension, which will force the joint more to be more unstable. Okay? When we look at side bending, same thing occurs. You have an opening up here on this right side, you have a closure on the left, and then when you do the rotation, you have a closure on the right and an opening on the left there. Okay? We talked a bit earlier about the shoulder. Before I go back to the shoulder, I'll talk about the knee. So again, the knee, flexion, extension. With flexion of the knee to extension, the tibia comes up, the meniscus comes up, the quad ligaments are tight, and the quadricep tendon becomes taut and low, the patella slides up. And then we go from flexion to extension, the tibia goes down, the ligaments become stretched, meniscus go down and back, and patella goes down. And lastly here, with the shoulder, so we talked earlier about the shoulder. We look at flexion of the arm. The humerus is going to slide down and then go into cavity. With extension, again, it's going to go back and slide down as well. With abduction, it's going to translate and go down inferiorly. Inferior means down, and I go into cavity. Adduction, it's going to go out and up. And then exrotation, the humerus is going to slide back and glide forward. And then with interrotation, you're going to get a translation forward and sliding backwards. Okay? So that's a little bit of a review between the biomechanics of the cervical region, of the spine, and of the knee. I hope that makes sense and gives you a visualization. Look at the pictures in the visual in the book, and I hope that clarifies and gives you some input to look at.